He is a gentle giant.
Very pleasant.
Almost always his attitude is positive.
And he's a truthful person.
Very jovial, outgoing.
The embodiment of Blacksburg.
His heart is as big as all of his frame.
The 2 years I worked at Hercules, I met the police chief at football games up here. I used to go to all the high school football games. And at that time, the police chief, you know, he had talked to me and we had talked quite a bit. And he says, is his exact words, he says, when you gonna come to work for me? He says, you know, I've always been looking for a colored boy to put on the police department. And I said, well, I'll keep it in mind. What had happened is that they had a reduction in force at Hercules, and when I got my papers, I had like 3 days to work, and then I would be without a job. And I happened to think about law enforcement, so I called the chief up, and he said, "Come on in and update your application." And so I came in and updated the application, and probably within about 3 days after update, I got a call from him. And so he had called two people, myself and another gentleman named Randolph Cromer, and we were both sitting there side by side, and he heard us both on the Saturday.
He was very excited, thrilled. He was just glowing all over. I seen a twinkle in his eye, a little twinkle that made me feel that, you know, he could capture the whole world if he wanted to.
And that was one of the most exciting days of my life, you know, and I'm saying like, hey, man, I got an opportunity.
Chief Brown took that and turned that into an opportunity and has spent his entire career being absolutely colorblind in the community.
In 1973, in the fall of '73, I was promoted to corporal, and I said, you know, he's 2 stripes, man, I was somebody, you know. And in December of 1975, I was promoted to the rank of a lieutenant. It seems like for 73, 74, and 75, it seems like when I got those promotions, within 3 or 4 months of that, I had a child. I mean, it seems like every time I got promoted, an additional child came to the family, you know, something like this. And so I was like, man, you know, when I got promoted to captain, I looked at my wife. She said, "No, we won't we won't have another child." In 1993, the former police chief left and went to Independence, Missouri, and so it opened up the position of police chief, and I was appointed as the interim police chief there for about 3.5 months, and. So at that particular time, I submitted my resume.
It was not surprising when the chief's job came open that he applied and that the citizens were overwhelmingly in favor of him being named chief. There was just no question that that's where the community wanted to go.
There was a number of citizens who were in this interim process who were sending letters and letters and letters and newspapers articles to the manager and the mayor, said that why do you need to go anywhere else and you got the perfect person in your backyard. Sometimes at the council meeting, I would catch the mayor and the manager, and I'd tell them, I said, hey, I said, I want you guys to know I'm not out there campaigning for this job, you know, and things like this. And I said, don't feel like you guys owe me anything, because I'm just tickled to death being a captain, you know. To be honest with you, I was just happy being a police officer. I could have been happy not having any rank whatsoever, just being an officer, being in a position to be able to help people.
I remember my dad, you know, got appointed chief, and you know, he was talking about different things that, you know, that he would change, and some things that he wouldn't change was the fact of him being in uniform. You know, he said that he started as a patrol officer, and you know, he loves his uniform, and it also shows that he's not above the other guys also, and I think that he's been in the uniform, he wants to be approachable by the public, and that's where he started. I think that's where his heart is in the uniform. And
Bill and I are from the same school. We believe that we all work together, and I think as the chief, you need to let your employees and the other officers know that you are part of the police department, that we're all together. It's not that it's us against them, but we're all together. So we wear a uniform, he and I both do, to let the members of the department know that we are a member of the police department and we're not up and apart and we're not separated from them. And that's very important, and a lot of chiefs do not do that.
The first time I met my husband was at Club 21. He was dressed in a blue shirt, black slacks. He looked really handsome. Anyway, I was going to order a drink. I think it was a Bloody Mary. But it was these peanuts that kept flying across me, you know, and I kept looking at them. And I thought it was the guy across me throwing the peanuts. And I said, "Why are you throwing peanuts at me?" He said, "It ain't me." And he was pointing the guy beside me. So when I looked over, I said, "Why are you throwing peanuts at me?" And he scooted closer and smiled and threw another peanut. I said, "You're feeling really good, aren't you?" He said, "You're so cute." And he kissed me right there. And I liked it. So I kissed him back. And we've been going on ever since.
He was intimidating, but friendly at the same time. He sat on my interview panel, and I remember everybody that was on the panel. I remember what I was wearing. I remember coming out of there thinking, there's no way I got that job. But he was quite intimidating in the interview.
My first impression of Chief Brown was that he was unusual. He was a man who never met a stranger. No matter whether he knew you or not, it was like he had known you all of his life.
I do know that I had an interview when I came up here with him, and even during the interview I was scared, but he made it relaxing and calming for me.
There's a number of things that you will not forget in this business. In 1975, in December of 1975, there were some people, three people in the city of Roanoke who had robbed a druggist who was making a night deposit. They robbed and they shot him. Those three people came to Blacksburg. I was working midnight. I was a midnight supervisor, sergeant. And when I came in about 9 o'clock at night, one of the officers had come in to get some shotguns. And I said, "Gary," I said, "what's going on?" He said, "Well, we just had a shooting up on Roanoke Street." So we thought they were in a house up on Roanoke Street. It's a gray side of the house up there, just near Rutledge Street there. And so we're sitting on that house, thinking that the people who shot this young man was in the house. So while we're sitting on the house, we get a call probably an hour later to where this kid had called in who was in the basement, and when he called the police department, he had believed that his sister had shot the mom and dad upstairs, but it wasn't that way. Greg Luger and John Collins had broken into the house. They were the people that shot the kid up here on Roanoke Street. They had broken into the house and they shot Mr. Dryland, they shot Mrs. Dryland, they shot Carol Dryland, the daughter, put her in the car with her, shot her 3 times, and one of them had left with her in the car trying to get away. The other one, John Collins, according to his statement, when he said Greg done all the shooting in the house, I ran out of the house, I threw my gun on my shoulder, and I ran across the commuter light on Prices Fork Road. And Luger hit the bypass. There was no Prices Fork Bridge out there at that time, it's just a traffic light. Louis Barber, who later became the sheriff, was a Christian Road police officer. He gets behind the car. And when he's behind the car, he's calling his radio to get some assistance there. And before he get assistance there, the car pulled into a driveway up past the bowling alley. So he had to get out of the car. When he got out of the car, Greg Luger had a sawed-off shotgun. He turns around and a pellet hits the sheriff right in the head. Well, that guy in the head. At that time, he got away. And we had got Carol Dryland at that time and got her to the hospital. Then we get a call the highway shop as you go out to the farmhouse. This guy had got over there and he shot a supervisor coming into work, shot him in the leg, and he took his car. Well, when he took his car, he starts down Radford Road. So we all start down Radford Road out toward Pilot behind this car, okay? And so when we get out there, we have like a little shootout. We exchange some rounds and stuff, and so we get the armored car up there. And this is like daylight. It's like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. Been out all night. And so I remember the first sergeant from state police with his loudspeaker. He says, Greg Luger, this is the state police. Throw down your weapon. And all of a sudden you say, pow, pow. He'd shoot at the armored car and bullets would bounce off the armored car. And so eventually we exchanged some bullets there a little bit back and forth. And then there was one muffled sound, and that's when he shot himself.
There was an incident here right after he became chief where a young man was shot by police officers in a really tragic situation.
The officers, you know, were in a position where it appeared that the suspect had an automatic pistol and might indeed start firing it, I think inside a drugstore or something like that. And so they finally had to fire shots back, and they were fatal.
And what I recall about Bill was him coming to speak to a group of at the Neighborhood Federation. And he sat down and he looked people in the eye. He was very thorough and methodical as he worked through the situation and how it came about.
He had knew Maurice when Maurice was growing up, and then, you know, wanting to be a strong figure for the public, and, you know, and then it was the issues with, you know, with Maurice's race and stuff like that. I really think that bothered my dad.
It was really traumatic for the community and the police department, and the chief handled that extremely well. Only a compassionate chief could have handled it as well as he did. Yeah.
The event that comes to mind that best captures his character for me is when the baby was found in the trash dump.
We had an incident where a lady gave birth to a baby, and she threw the baby in a dumpster. And it's just like she had called the rescue squad and said she was bleeding badly, hemorrhaging. And so most all our people are fire rescue. And so they get there to the scene first and they help direct the rescue. And if they need CPR, they can give CPR and so forth. So they get to the door and the lady's dripping blood, and they said, sit down and calm down, the rescue will be here in a minute. And so when the rescue squad got there, and they start doctoring them, and so when they got ready to leave, they seen drops of blood with the flashlight. This was like, you know, 12:30, like 2 o'clock in the morning. So they take the flashlight and see these drops of blood. And they track that blood over to the dumpster. And they start fooling around the dumpster a little bit, and so they find this small baby. When you stand there at 3 o'clock in the morning and you look on the table at that little bitty full birth baby, I mean, just like head full of hair, look like a little part in his head and everything, and you bond with that baby, and it's just almost like it's like I had a personal bond with this baby. She denied that baby was hers, denied, and the only thing we could charge her with was the throwing personal remains on private property, disposing of a body, which was a misdemeanor charge. We gave that baby a nice home going that you wouldn't believe.
The child had died, and he got in touch with me and asked me if I would organize a memorial service for that child, if our church would take charge of that. When we talked about what was happening there, and he talked about the sadness of the situation, tears welled up in his eyes. And he started talking with compassion not only about that baby, but wondering what had happened in a mother's life that would bring her to a point like that. Everything about it was a compassionate situation, and it really showed to me the depth of character that he had, the kind of love that he had for people, and the kind of interest that he had in his community.
His character is beyond reproach. He is very ethical, he's honest, he's trustworthy, he's loyal. He's just everything that you would expect a police chief to be.
He used to be really muscular and in shape, and he looked like a superhero, and I was just so fascinated with him, and I was like, you know, that's what I want to be. I want to look just like my dad. And
my wife and I were married. Chief attended our wedding, and we had a good time with him. Yeah, he, I think he had several other weddings that he was invited to that weekend, but he made it a point to come to mine, and I always appreciated that.
As a police chief, he has done more to keep things stable than I can remember since I was a little kid. His ability to diffuse potentially harmful situations and to be a strong representative of a police force in a town, but one that is your neighbor and your friend, I think is unparalleled in the Commonwealth.
He can go into some of the toughest situations where people are mad at each other, and within minutes people are laughing. You know, he just has that gift to kind of lighten up situations, and as a police chief, that's a great talent to have.
I had a guy out on the bypass. I didn't have any backup. By circumstance, everyone was tied up, and it was just me on the road by myself. And I got out on the bypass and had a man out there that was high on drugs, and we got in a foot pursuit in the woods, and he pulled a weapon on me, and I had to draw down on him. We had a long chase, and I was trying to call and didn't have any backup at all. No one to come to help me. And Chief Brown had been in his office, and he was the captain at the time, and he grabbed up his keys and came out there to me and made his way out there to me, and he and I, in a big old field full of mud, waddled around with this suspect and drug him out of there. And thought it was pretty special that the captain of the PD was sitting in his office. He told me later he realized that there wasn't nobody on the road but me, and he was just kind of listening, and he'd look to see where his keys were on the desk in case anything went on and I might need some help. And as it turned out today, I needed some help. And the help I got was the second highest ranking man in the building. And that was pretty special to have him come out there with me and us to get dirty together and drag that guy out of the field. It said to me a whole lot about the kind of man Chief Brown was.
Because of Bill Brown, and I know this from having two children, that children have grown up in Blacksburg with a tremendous respect for law enforcement. I think that is a contribution that you cannot measure.
we had an officer that was killed in the line of duty, and you know, I was able to talk to him and, you know, cry on his shoulder and stuff like that, and he was just there for me.
My dad's been gone for 13 years now, and what I could at one time talk to him about or seek direction from him about is the one thing that I can do with Chief Brown.
He likes to talk.
Bill loves to talk.
The chief's a big talker.
Some of the stories he tells us are just absolutely funny. He knows everything, he's been everywhere, he's done everything.
There was a gentleman, and we were talking about something, and I said, you know, you got people complaining about everything. There's people complaining about this and that. And he says, well, sir, or he said, I am the one complaining about that. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't think.
We were recently at an academy graduation. I was introducing one of our new police officers to Chief Bryant from Salem. It's one of the chief's buddies. They go a lot of places together. And he walked up, interrupted, and said, hey, don't let that guy fool you. He's 64 years old. When I was a little kid in nursery school, he came to our class and told us about what it was like to be a police officer. So that's the kind of jokes that he pulls on his peers.
I always kid Chief Brown when I was appointed the manager that he actually started working for the town the year I was born, and I don't know if that makes him old or if it makes me young or what it says, but I always kid him about that.
We went into one of the local evening establishments, and they carded me. And Chief Brown thought that was the funniest thing, and he still mentions it to this day, that calls me the young man that got carded. Of course, this is when I was about 44, 45 it happened.
We were riding in a police cruiser, an unmarked